Hi, my name is Ryan Anderson, and I'm excited to announce a new series called Startup Stories with Google Cloud. In this show, we'll be talking to business and technology leaders who are building innovative, modern applications and disrupting their markets. We'll hear about founding stories, personal triumphs, growth challenges, and what separates successful startups. Thanks for joining, and let's get started.
So the transition was super fast. We spin up the infrastructure, make sure things are looking good, cut over the DNS, and then we're running on Google Cloud. So the transition was pretty seamless for us. It was really quick to be able to move over. But what we noticed immediately, because we had a microservices architecture back then, was the inner machine networking was far faster than what we were seeing previously. And this actually had pretty big performance implications for us. Even when we had barely any customers, it was immediately obvious.
Welcome back, everyone. Our guest today is Trevor Marshall, the CTO of Current, a digital banking startup making banking accessible and affordable for everyone. With its most recent round of funding earlier this year, Current is valued at more than $2 billion with leading VCs like Andreessen Horowitz. In this interview, Trevor talks about founding the company, how you can get your paycheck a little earlier using their product, and why his team decided to move to Google Cloud for the credits, but ended up staying for the technology. Current is actively hiring right now. You can learn more by visiting current.com/careers. Thanks for tuning in and hope you enjoy.
Welcome back, everyone, to Startup Stories. I'm really excited today to welcome our guest. He's the CTO of Current, and that's Trevor Marshall. Trevor, thanks for joining.
Ryan, thanks for having me.
And a lot I want to talk about today, your background, what's exciting going on at Current. To get us started, for our audience who might not have heard of Current, can you tell us a bit about yourself and the story of Current?
Yeah, absolutely. So to start with, Current is a financial technology platform based here in the US. We're just almost 7 years old, which is pretty exciting. And what we do is we build technology which serves checking account functionality and other types of banking features. And really our role is to be an interface for our customers to the best possible financial outcome. So what we've launched in the market today is a banking experience that allows you to get your paycheck a little bit earlier because we're doing a lot of that processing ourselves. You can have a physical debit card, virtual debit card you can spend anywhere, Visa is accepted. And we have a lot of other cool features that maybe we can talk about later in the podcast. But really what we're trying to do is create the best-in-class spending experience, best-in-class savings experience, and eventually best-in-class investment and other financial experiences, which are important to our members. We have 3 million members here in the US, and that's growing pretty quickly. My story is almost one completely in terms of my career of Current. Current has been the majority of my career at this point, considering how long we've been doing this. But I actually started my career at Morgan Stanley, where I was hired by Stuart Sopp, who was our CEO. So he's been my boss my whole career. Right out of college, I joined Morgan Stanley's foreign exchange desk. Stuart had been running foreign exchange desks around the world, starting in London, Sydney, Singapore, Hong Kong, and then New York. All foreign exchange, G10 spot, short-term interest rate trading. And when I joined really because of him. We got on immediately when I met him during my internship there. And what I wanted to do when I joined Morgan Stanley was bring Bitcoin trading to Wall Street. And this was 2012, so a little bit early and a little bit before Morgan Stanley was ready. It was an incredible experience there. But after Stuart left in 2014, I left as well because I had kind of convinced him that there was something really exciting, and I thought that maybe if I left and did some projects with him, we could end up working on some of the things that I was really excited about. And that was really the genesis of what ultimately became Current.
So you guys have been a Google customer now for a few years. I mean, tell me about kind of your journey there. I mean, prior to even evaluating Google, what were you using? What did the platform look like? I mean, what were the challenges I guess you were up against?
Yeah, we actually initially deployed on AWS. And that was because we had some pretty good developer incentives. And to be totally honest, the reason that we switched to Google initially is the key thing, is because we ran out of developer incentives in one place and got developer incentives at GCP. But pretty quickly, we from day one. So we had a very like a very bare bones in terms of course, we're not actually deploying hardware, but a very bare bones structure in the sense of we had images which we were just running on, EC2 on AWS, and that translated extremely quickly into just deploying those same images onto compute in Google Cloud. So the transition was super fast. We spin up the infrastructure, make sure things are looking good, cut over the DNS, and then we're running on Google Cloud. So the transition was like pretty seamless for us. It was really quick to be able to move over. But what we noticed immediately, because we had a microservices architecture back then, was the inner machine networking was far faster than what we were seeing previously. And this actually had pretty big performance implications for us. Even when we had barely any customers, it was immediately obvious. And I think that's a huge credit to the networking that Google does. It's a huge differentiator. Like the physical fiber that's in place and the way that networking is approached is a huge factor. It was one of the first differentiators that we saw early on Google Cloud. But over time, as we started maturing our stack, we just found ourselves using more and more products that happened to be like Google specialties. So the first one and obvious one was in 2018 when we migrated our backend services into totally being orchestrated in Kubernetes. And GKE, and at that time, Kubernetes was still like technically a Google product. So in terms of Google deployment, you're going to go to the place where it's actually actively maintained. And GKE continues to be just the best in class for hosting any sort of Kubernetes backends. So that was our first okay, here's the real product differentiation. And as we continued to sort of evolve the patterns that we had in place, we found other best in class products. Like I think one of the best examples of what Google does amazingly well is PubSub. It is like a truly amazing thing to be able to have, once guarantees extremely consistently around the world. It's something that it's very hard to engineer. And even though it's a relatively simple product, the guarantees that you get by using that product can completely change the way that you architect the rest of your stack, because you can now rely on more offline types of workloads that can be consumed in a consistent way. And further beyond that, sort of moving into better practices around online versus, synchronous versus asynchronous workloads, we've also started going in the direction of a lot of the data infrastructure that Google has in place. So data flow is a big part of our stack now, and BigQuery for the warehousing capabilities is also a huge part of our stack. So I think over time, our journey with GCP has really been one of, okay, we're bringing on like talented people to the team. Like this is not my expertise, right? Like I at this point really just relying on an amazing team to help make these technical decisions. But as the sort of really high quality decisions come into the team, it's driving us in a direction that just happens to be best served by Google, and that's pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, it is. And you spoke to some of the technology and what the team found exciting. You initially came for the credits. It sounds like I imagine through our startup program, which is an amazing program. But can you tell me a bit about the business impact and what the technology has kind of enabled the team to achieve?
Yeah, it comes down to like building a resilient, resumable, consistent, like all of the things that you expect from a platform are guarantees that end up being baked into GCP. And that's everything like from the technologies that I've mentioned, just down to like the way that persistent disk is encrypted in a PCI compliant way, which is extremely relevant to us. And so it allows us to really push a lot of the consideration sort of outside of our scope and keep our team pretty small compared to what you would have to be to manage a lot of these things more directly. So that's given, in terms of business impact, far more product efficiency and developer efficiency, because we don't have to think about, well, what are the mechanics that require PubSub to work and how do we implement those ourselves? Because we just, effectively call the API and move on with our lives.
And I don't think we want to make this a complete infomercial for Google. So, I mean, what should we be doing better? Is there anything you feel Google can improve on as we look forward?
As we look forward, I think there's definitely some work to be done around some usability. I think a lot of these are power tools, and it's really easy to cut your foot off if you're not careful. I think that it speaks really well to our team in their ability to navigate, but they are extremely powerful technologies And to be honest, it's hard to put a UI around that, because it's like, how do you express some of the more nuanced things without quite a lot of code? But I think that's probably an area for all cloud providers going forward, which is like, how do you provide a better ramp up in knowledge experience for folks who might not be familiar with the technology?
No, thanks for sharing. So I want to move a little bit more to Current and the technology and what you guys are building and what you're excited about. I know that you're actively hiring for roles out in New York. Can you tell me, what's the most exciting thing about working at Current right now?
Well, I think the most exciting thing continues to be the ability to actually have tremendous leverage in the outcome of the company and the outcome of our members. So when you join Current, within the first few months, you're leading initiatives which impact millions of people in an extremely positive way. And that continues to be the most exciting thing for me, even as I like move a little bit further away from the code, although I still, commit and release pretty much daily. It's super fun to be a part of that creative process, and have that creative process being validated through the feedback that we get from our users. We do a lot of work in terms of member experience and listening to our customers, and it feels great to be able to like very much directly point to your commits and say that is now making someone's lives better. And yeah, that's a great feeling.
And I love the mission and how you guys are helping customers. Can you share a bit about how you guys specifically are helping your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fundamental model that we're able to employ actually is a result of regulation that was passed after the financial crisis. It put large banks in a position where it was a lot harder to monetize a user who did not keep a high balance in those checking accounts. In particular, the regulation around interchange prevented a bank from really being able to serve a customer profitably without things like overdraft fees, without things like account minimum fees, and all the other fees that you find associated with accounts at larger institutions. And the way that we're structured as a technology platform, we actually work with smaller banks to be able to deliver these services. And so our customers have accounts effectively at these smaller banks, and the deposits go to those smaller banks. But Current is managing the full experience of those accounts. And from our customers' perspective, we're a bank, but the reality is we're just that interface. We're that facilitator of those experiences. And so that has enabled us to actually use interchange as a big part of our business model, and work with many banks. Even if we were super successful and grew to be within those thresholds that fall under that regulation, we're very dynamic about the way that we can work with a lot of smaller banks. So it's giving smaller banks a really great opportunity in partnership with us around new revenue streams. And for us, that flexibility allows us to really grow the product sustainably and take our customers' best interests, because we don't have to rely on those other monetization mechanics. Like, our primary and first-class citizens are the customers that a lot of larger institutions can't serve. And then when you look at sort of the other people who are tackling this problem, and there's a lot of great companies that are building products in the same vein as Current, it really comes down to that technology differentiation. The fact that we're taking on that core service technology burden, becomes the advantage, because that burden translates into massive opportunity in terms of what can be integrated and how quickly you can move on new products and features.
I love the model, and it sounds like it's a really big win for the banks that you're partnering with, and for the customers that you're serving. And which roles, I guess, do you have open, and who would make a great fit?
We're hiring all sorts of software engineers. Well, we have, current.com/careers is the quick plug, which can summarize this pretty well. But I'm very focused on our engineering recruiting efforts, and our backend core stack is Java. There's some Node.js, there's some TypeScript, but it's really about finding folks who want to work within extremely modern frameworks that touch sort of these more antiquated frameworks at the edge. But at the core of our thing is, at the core of our technology, we have some really exciting stuff we're doing with gRPC, another Google technology, and Protobuf and API design, and touch like these really nuanced and advanced engineering techniques at scale. Those are the type of people that we're looking to hire, and the experience levels kind of all over, up and down sort of the range. One thing that we've invested a lot in is our onboarding experience here. So not only have we been working hard to sort of increase our recruiting capacity, but recruiting doesn't end with an offer. And like, it really ends when, I feel like someone has really joined the team when they are the ones who are leading an initiative from nothing into production. And that can take a few months to really understand the way that the system works. So we have a buddy system when folks join. They have someone that can really guide them through those first few months. And we have, like very clear day one, we have a repo, which is, every engineer is very familiar with, which, by following the README of that repo, you're fully tooling, you've kind of understanding all of our deployment methodology. And so we've invested a lot in making that transition for, people coming from bigger companies who sort of expect that type of structure, and people who are coming from smaller companies who are learning that type of structure. We attempt to serve that extremely well. And that's resulted in extremely high employee retention, and frankly, like a really great experience at a job, because I've heard some pretty scary things at other places.
No, definitely. No, it sounds like a great culture, an opportunity to really make, dig in and make a difference. I will make sure I include that link.
Thank you.
As part for our listeners. One more question to close us out. What advice do you give to other CTOs who are looking to, who are building cloud native products and choosing a vendor to partner with and just trying to sort things out? I mean, what advice do you have for people like that?
Yeah, I'm usually the one seeking advice less than I'm the one giving advice, and maybe that is in itself sort of the advice, in the sense of there are a lot of people, like the challenges that we face oftentimes feel extremely personal and intimate. But the reality is there's like at least 20 people in your city who have probably experienced the same exact problem. And so making a real effort to meet people in your direct sort of vertical space, but also the wider horizontal space. Everyone wants to talk and vent, and it's not only cathartic, it's actually quite educational. And so I spend a lot of time talking with my peers just to hear about sort of the challenges they're facing, and bounce ideas off of others. So you kind of have in the position of being a technology leader, not even being a CTO, but like just leading functions within organizations. There are other people's, like, there's very few unique problems. Ultimately, a lot of problems can be abstracted to something that's extremely common. So talk to people and meet as many people as you can.
No, I love that. I mean, it sounds much more effective than learning the hard way and making every mistake.
And you have to do that too. I've done more of that probably than I'd like.
Same. Well, hey, Trevor, I appreciate your time. Thanks again for being a guest on the show. I'm excited to share this. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me.